Hi all, Kyber1 here, and today we are looking at the Fate Adversarial Toolkit. And the way we're looking at this book is not for the big F, not for Fate. But we are looking at this for inspiration. And what Fate does really well is it's essentially cross-pollination between genres, between games, between players and GMs having creative control. You can really use what you find in this to improve no matter what role-playing game you're playing. You can improve it with this book. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm just trying to give you the reason why I highly recommend this book. And that took over a minute to say. But you have different types of adversaries. You have enemies, obstacles, and constraints. There are 4 different types of enemies: threats, hitters, bosses, and fillers. Fillers are your basic minions. Bosses are the big bad encounters. Threats are kind of like the Predator. Hitters are kind of like Bane. Once you take down Bane's Venom, from DC, he falls. Obstacles. You have hazards, blocks, and distractions. And the one thing that I really wish that Fate would do better is when it's describing a type of obstacle or a type of enemy, it'll say the classification, but they don't do that. They don't give the subclass, they don't give the class. And then you have constraints: countdowns, limitations, and resistance. So building adversaries, and they at least tell you within context of this book what page things are on. And it goes over this stuff pretty well. But let's get to the... let's see. Okay. Obstacles. Hazards. So, if an obstacle can attack the PCs, it's a hazard. So fire jets, rolling borders, or a sniper too far away to be dealt with directly, they're all hazards. Every hazard has a name, a skill rating, and a weapon rating of 1 to 4. So there are rules to follow for anything that can harm the PCs. And that is a hazard is a type of obstacle. And then you have blocks. Where hazards exist to hurt the PCs, blocks prevent them from doing things they want to do. Blocks can cause stress, though they don't always. The chief difference between blocks and hazards is that blocks don't take actions. Okay? Distractions. Where hazards attack the PCs directly and blocks prevent them from taking certain actions, distractions force the PCs to figure out their priorities. Of the obstacles, distractions are often the least mechanically defined. So, for instance, Sinister Ritual. It is a... what do you call it? See, and this is why I wish they would say this. Okay, so obstacle, distraction, Sinister Ritual. Choice and repercussion. Bus full of civilians. You have opposition, you have a choice, and you have 2 different repercussions depending on how you deal with it. The glittering gem. You have a choice and 2 separate repercussions depending on how you deal with it. And you want the repercussions to be broad. So if they're not broad, but defined. So if you're running down a hall and there are 3 different exits to this hall, you could say repercussion left, repercussion right, or repercussion center. And then each one of those things is so specifically defined that is the nature that you're dealing with. And you can utilize that in any role-playing game. Then you have constraints. Constraints are like countdowns, where you have a track and a trigger and an outcome. So, for instance, you're running out of fuel in 5 turns. Okay, so the track is 5. The trigger is what happen, like what sets this off, and then what's the outcome when this happens. So characters and players have to figure out a way to circumnavigate the consequences of the countdown. And then, of course, you have ticking time bomb, forward scout. Okay, limitations. Limitations are fictional elements that alter how PCs must deal with a particular threat. Maybe they can't just kill the werewolf that's been terrorizing a small Pennsylvania town because he's the son of one of the PCs and doesn't know what he's doing when he's a werewolf. That makes sense. That is a limitation within the reality of the minds of the users. And you could see this in The Witcher, when Henry Cavill has to deal with the stragma. The young girl that is the creature. And that's the limitation. He doesn't want to kill her. And that is a brilliant concept. Resistances. Resistance have a lock and a key. So the dragon can't be harmed by mortal weaponry, but the key, and that's the lock, but the key to defeating the dragon would be a certain weapon or a type of weapon or a class of weapon. I hope that makes sense. There's just these really great examples in here. And then you have environments. And they have really excellent GM advice. And then you got rogues galleries. And the cool thing about many of the characters in this book is they have troubles. For the Kindler, only dangerous at a distance. For Fire Breather Lieutenant, slow to react. So you have an idea for how to treat them as the GM. And then once the players sort of figure this out, if they're keyed in on the information, they will gain information on these troubles, and then they're like, oh, I can exploit this. And that's what troubles are designed to do. Troubles are designed to be exploited. And when you have different classes and categories, for instance, Officer Gillette or Officer Rosenberg, the trouble is, I don't make decisions, I follow orders. And then you have, let's see, Cyberpunk. Okay. Aerotech, Cyber Technician. And then the trouble here is desperate to get recognized for my work. So she might work with the PCs based on the idea that she's not being recognized. And she's not able to do certain things. But one of her other aspects is penthouse security clearance. So, spoiler alert, in some games you infiltrate and you meet somebody with security clearance and they're willing to work with you because it benefits them in some way. And then they can use it as a setup, or they can backstab you later. And that's cool. Pulp Adventure. Let's see. Elsa Vogel. Trouble. Yes, but what's in it for me? A very selfish mentality. And you see this sort of attitude in Smugglers. Her high concept is a brutally effective mercenary captain. And you can see that. And it works together. The high concept and the trouble don't always have to work together. Like, they can be contradictory at times. And it adds more depth to the character. Clockwork Guardian. High concept. Automated temple protector. Trouble. Can only move in jerks and starts. Oh, rock hard armor. So there's so many different little things to this. 80s action. Trouble. Incredibly overconfident. La Cazadora. Trouble. I don't trust technology. High concept. The world's greatest hunter. So you're looking at somebody that hunts with like a spear or a dart gun. Yeah, right there. Other aspects. My handy tranquilizer dart gun. Kansada. I don't know. So basically, this book re-informs you as to how to make certain things work in your game. And it's more than just for Fate. I would argue that this is the type of resource that any game master could possibly use. And the cool thing about this is the way this works, it's really it creates that freedom of thought that old school Dungeons and Dragons had, when you didn't have the skill systems, when you didn't have certain other aspects. You had to be creative. You had to come up with solutions. Oh, look, I have this 10-foot pole. What does the 10-foot pole do? Well, okay, I'm going to use it like this. And when you translate the items from basic Dungeons and Dragons into Fate, you're essentially still playing the same game. And all you need to do is utilize the levels with the DC. For instance, say you're rolling your D20 and good is +3. So this guy's got good armor. 10 is the average AC. So add 3 to that, beat 13. All right. So Kyber 1 out. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you.